In the grand, sprawling tapestry of existence on this planet, each thread represents a unique species, a marvel of evolution woven over millennia. For millions of years, this tapestry has grown, becoming richer and more complex with every new life form. But in recent times, within our own lifetimes, we have witnessed threads being pulled, unraveling parts of this intricate design forever. We are living through an era of unprecedented loss, a quiet fading of voices that once echoed through forests, soared across skies, and swam in our planet's rivers. These are not tales from a distant prehistoric past, but stories of our very recent neighbors, whose final farewells have gone largely unnoticed. The richness of life, what we call biodiversity, is not merely a collection of beautiful and fascinating creatures. It is the very foundation of our world's stability. Each species, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, plays a role in the intricate web of life that sustains us all. From pollinating our crops to purifying our water, the services provided by a healthy, diverse ecosystem are invaluable and irreplaceable. When a species vanishes, a vital link in this chain is broken and the entire structure weakens, often in ways we cannot immediately comprehend. The consequences ripple outwards, affecting countless other organisms, including ourselves. This is a story of remembrance, a tribute to those we have lost in just the past few decades. It is a somber roll call of the recently departed, a reminder of the fragility of life and the profound impact of human activity on the natural world. By looking back at these recent farewells, we can perhaps better understand the urgency of the present. We must learn from these silent goodbyes, for the fate of countless other species, and indeed our own, hangs precariously in the balance. It is a call to witness, to understand, and ultimately to act before more threads are lost forever. On the remote Galapagos island of Pinta, a solitary giant once roamed. He was known to the world as Lonesome George, the very last Pinta Island tortoise. For decades, he was a living symbol of extinction, a poignant, lonely reminder of a species dwindling to a single individual. He carried the weight of his entire lineage upon his great domed shell. He had witnessed the world change around him, his companions vanishing one by one until he was the sole survivor. A relic from a time when his kind moved in slow, deliberate herds across the volcanic landscape of his island home. He was a quiet testament to the enduring power of life, yet also to its profound vulnerability. Conservationists worked tirelessly for nearly 40 years in a desperate search for a mate for George. They scoured zoos and private collections around the globe and even introduced him to females of closely related subspecies from neighboring islands, hoping against all odds that the Pinta Island bloodline might somehow continue. These efforts, though born of great hope and dedication, were ultimately in vain. George showed little interest, and no offspring were ever produced. He remained a bachelor, a final solitary punctuation mark at the end of his species-long story, a story that had unfolded over countless generations. In June of 2012, Lonesome George was found motionless in his enclosure by his longtime keeper. He had passed away quietly in the night, and with him, the Pinta Island tortoise, Chelonoidis abingdoni, was gone forever. His death was not just the end of one animal's life, it was the final, irreversible closing of a unique chapter in the book of life on Earth. His preserved remains now stand in a museum, a silent monument not only to his species, but to the devastating finality of extinction. He is a stark warning of what happens when our intervention comes too late. Across the vast savannas of West and Central Africa, another giant once browsed peacefully. The western black rhinoceros, a magnificent subspecies, was a formidable presence, its two horns a symbol of primeval power. These creatures were architects of their environment, shaping the landscape as they moved through it, their presence a vital part of the ecosystem's balance. For centuries they had thrived, navigating the delicate dance of predator and prey, their thick armor-like hide a defense against all but the most determined of nature's challenges. But they were not prepared for a new threat, one driven by greed and armed with high-powered rifles. The plight of the western black rhino is a tragic tale of human desire, a relentless demand for its horn, prized in traditional medicine and as a status symbol for dagger handles, fueled a brutal wave of poaching that swept across its range. Despite conservation efforts and the establishment of protected areas, the illegal wildlife trade proved too powerful, too pervasive. The value placed on a rhino's horn in illicit markets far outweighed the resources available to protect them. Every day, the rhinos were hunted, their numbers plummeting catastrophically in a matter of decades. By the turn of the millennium, only a handful were thought to survive in their last stronghold in Cameroon. Extensive surveys were conducted, but search parties found only tracks and signs that eventually went cold. The silence from the bush became deafening. In 2011, after years with no confirmed sightings, the International Union for Conservation of Nature made the official heartbreaking declaration: the western black rhinoceros was extinct. A creature that had walked the earth for millions of years had been erased in a few short decades, not by a natural catastrophe, but by a market for a keratinous growth on its nose. Far from the African plains, a different kind of tragedy was unfolding in the murky waters of China's longest river, the Yangtze. Here lived a creature of myth and legend, the baiji, a pale, almost blind freshwater dolphin with a long, elegant beak. Known as the goddess of the Yangtze, it had navigated the river's complex currents for 20 million years, using its sophisticated sonar to hunt for fish in the cloudy depths. The baiji was a unique evolutionary marvel, one of only a handful of dolphin species to have ever made freshwater rivers its exclusive home, perfectly adapted to this singular, bustling environment. But the Yangtze River was changing at a pace the baiji could not withstand. The pressures of China's rapid industrialization turned the river into a crowded, noisy, and polluted thoroughfare. Unregulated and unsustainable fishing practices, particularly the use of rolling hooks and gill nets, became deadly traps. The cacophony of boat traffic interfered with the dolphin's delicate echolocation, leaving it unable to navigate or find food effectively. The river that had been its sanctuary for eons had become an unforgiving gauntlet of man-made hazards from which there was no escape. In 2006, an international expedition spent 6 weeks surveying the Yangtze, desperately searching for any sign of the baiji. They scoured almost 3,500 kilometers of the river with advanced optical and acoustic equipment, but they found nothing. Not a single dolphin was seen or heard. The conclusion was stark and unavoidable. The baiji was declared functionally extinct, the first cetacean to be driven to extinction by human activity. The goddess of the Yangtze had vanished, her song silenced forever by the roar of progress, leaving behind only a ghost in the great river. High in the rugged, windswept peaks that form the border between France and Spain, a master of the mountainside once lived. The Pyrenean ibex, or bucardo, was a magnificent wild goat, distinguished by its large, impressively curved horns. It was perfectly adapted to its high-altitude home, capable of navigating treacherous cliffs and surviving the harsh mountain winters with remarkable agility and resilience. For thousands of years, its silhouette was a familiar sight against the rocky Pyrenean skyline, a symbol of the untamed wilderness of this formidable mountain range. Its story is one of a slow decline, followed by a sudden final end. Through the 19th and 20th centuries, the bucardo was hunted relentlessly. Its numbers dwindled steadily until, by the end of the 1980s, only a tiny, fragmented population of less than a dozen individuals remained, clinging to existence in Spain's Ordesa National Park. Conservationists watched with a sense of helpless dread as the last few animals aged and died off one by one. The species was slipping through their fingers, its genetic diversity eroded to nothing. The final chapter was written on a winter's day in the year 2000. On January 6th, the very last known Pyrenean ibex, a 13-year-old female named Celia, was found dead, her skull crushed by a falling tree. But her story, and that of her species, had a bizarre and poignant postscript. Scientists had collected skin cells from Celia before her death, and in 2003, they attempted something extraordinary, to bring the species back through cloning. A clone was successfully born, but due to lung defects, it survived for only 7 minutes. The Pyrenean ibex thus holds a unique and tragic distinction. It is the only animal to have gone extinct not once, but twice. In the dry, thorny Caatinga forests of northeastern Brazil, the air was once filled with the flash of brilliant blue. This was the home of the Spix's macaw, a stunningly beautiful parrot of a unique azure hue. It was a highly intelligent and social bird, forming lifelong pair bonds and nesting in the hollows of ancient carabera trees that grew along the seasonal riverbeds. Their calls were a characteristic sound of this specific arid landscape, a vibrant splash of life and color against the muted tones of the scrubland. They were intimately tied to this habitat, dependent on it for everything. The beauty of the Spix's macaw was, tragically, the cause of its downfall. It became a highly coveted prize for the illegal pet trade, with collectors willing to pay astronomical sums for a single bird. Trappers relentlessly pursued them, cutting down their nesting trees to capture the chicks within. This, combined with the widespread loss of their specialized habitat due to agriculture and the construction of a hydroelectric dam, created a perfect storm of threats. The wild population was decimated with breathtaking speed, vanishing from the landscape almost before the world realized it was in trouble. By the year 2000, the last known male in the wild disappeared. After his mate had been illegally captured years earlier, he had famously paired with a female of a different macaw species, but the Spix's lineage in its natural home had come to an end. The species was declared extinct in the wild. A small, fragile population of a few dozen birds survives in captivity, scattered across breeding centers. A desperate high-stakes conservation program is underway to one day return them to Brazil, but the forest they once knew is no longer silent. It is a silence filled with the absence of that brilliant, chattering blue. The stories of Lonesome George, the western black rhino, the baiji, the bucardo, and the Spix's macaw are not just historical footnotes. They are echoes from the very recent past, solemn warnings that reverberate into our present. Each extinction represents a world made poorer, a loss of beauty, complexity, and potential that can never be recovered. These are not isolated incidents but symptoms of a much larger crisis, a great unraveling driven by habitat destruction, climate change, pollution, and direct exploitation. The silence left behind by these creatures is a space that can never be refilled. It is a permanent void in the story of our planet. Yet, despair is a luxury we cannot afford. The fate of these animals was sealed, but for countless others, the story is not yet over. From the mountain gorilla to the Amur leopard, from the vaquita to the orangutan, thousands of species stand on the same precipice from which the baiji and the pinta tortoise have fallen. Their survival now depends entirely on us. It depends on our willingness to make conscious choices, to value the health of our planet over short-term gain, and to see the natural world not as a resource to be plundered, but as a shared home to be protected and cherished. The power to change this narrative lies with each and every one of us. We can support organizations on the front lines of conservation, fighting to protect habitats and combat poaching. We can make sustainable choices in our daily lives, reducing our own footprint on the planet's finite resources. We must raise our voices, demanding that our leaders prioritize the protection of biodiversity. We stand at a crossroads. One path leads to a lonelier, more desolate world. The other leads to a future where humanity and the rich tapestry of life can continue to thrive together. The choice is ours, and the time to make it is now.